Hi, and welcome to Open, the show that opens the Bronx and the rest of the world to you. I'm Kibin Alleyne, and today we'll update you on what's happening in and around our borough. Coming up, there have been rising concerns about the adoption process at the Humane Society of New York. The campaign organizer for their turn joins me to discuss these issues. Why is the adoption process taking so long? Then the Womb Bus is on a mission to bring mobile perinatal health to the people of the Bronx. The founder of the Womb Bus joins me later to discuss more details. What will people learn when they interact with the Womb Bus? After that, the Center for Excellence in Youth Education helps students from 7th grade through college prepare for careers in science and healthcare. The program director for the CEYE shares more details later on. How could the inclusion of these kids impact the future of healthcare? And finally, a community-based organization is on a mission to help members of the brown and Black community to heal from their trauma through art and film. The co-founder and the director of programs for Nana's Living Room joins me later to discuss their mission. And what ways do movies, arts, and photography assist in healing? So stay tuned, all this and much more is headed your way because we're now officially open. Hello everyone, I'm Kibin Alleyne, and today is Tuesday, May 23rd. You're now watching Open, a program bringing the Bronx and New York City straight to you. Don't forget to stay connected with us via social media at BronxNet TV. For many animal lovers, adopting a pet is a special experience. However, some people are being denied that moment. Those turning to the Humane Society of New York and Animal Care Center are met with several challenges and closed doors when looking to adopt. This long-time issue has raised concerns amongst animal rights activists like Donny, who now joins me to discuss.
Dr. Hirschberg! This is the only animal shelter in New York that continues to use COVID as an excuse to keep the building closed to adopters.
They are still not allowing anyone in the building to see the animals, to adopt them.
These dogs should not be kept in a cage. They should have the opportunity to have a family.
When my cat died a year and a half ago, I was anxious to get another cat. The first place I contacted was the Humane Society. When I asked them about adopting, they said, we'll get back to you. And they hung up the phone. I never heard back from them again.
So many people have stopped to say that they've actually gone to breeders because they haven't heard back.
Locked in cages round the clock!
Lies, excuses, what a crop! They're supposed to find a home for these animals that they waited for such a long time. I think since the pandemic, so it's like 3 years. It's way too long.
It's been 3 years since you closed this building to adopters, Dr. Schmidt. What kind of veterinarian turns a blind eye to animal cruelty? Lauren Kostler, don't you care?
Cats and dogs are in despair!
They're stuck in their cages indefinitely while you continue to collect money off unsuspecting donors who believe that you're facilitating adoptions in earnest.
We now welcome Donny. Donny, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So can you first just explain what we, saw in that video?
Yeah, sure. So when I learned that animals were being warehoused at the Humane Society of New York, which is this large, wealthy shelter in a busy residential neighborhood, I was appalled. And before I did anything about it, I did my own research to corroborate whistleblower allegations. We were initially contacted by a whistleblower who informed us that animals were being warehoused, that adoptions had come to a virtual standstill in early 2020, and that the building was closed to the public under false pretenses. They were claiming to be closed this was in 2021 when I was contacted by a whistleblower. They were claiming in mid-2021 to be closed due to COVID, but what the whistleblower said was that they were actually closed because of violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and they couldn't reopen unless they made the building wheelchair accessible. And so they were continuing to use COVID as an excuse to keep the building closed, and they had no plan to ever renovate the building. They were just going to keep the building closed to the public indefinitely. So I spent a couple of months corroborating these allegations before turning to protest. And what we found is that, dozens of people were submitting adoption applications and weren't hearing back. And that there were, in fact, animals in the shelter who had been there for years and still are.
Well, I definitely thank you so much for sharing, a little bit about that clip. I want to talk a little bit more about your organization just in general. Can you talk about Their Turn?
So Their Turn is a grassroots animal rights organization in New York City. So we organize campaigns like what you just saw. This campaign is calling on the Humane Society of New York to send their animals to shelters that are open. And we have a website where we report on animal rights news. Much of what we report on is the campaigns that we work on locally in New York City, whether it's a campaign I'm organizing or campaigns that other advocates are organizing, like a fur-free NYC campaign or a campaign to get schools to introduce more plant-based foods.
Now, I want to talk about, your most recent effort, which is, the adoption process at the Humane Society of New York. For many people, adoption seemed like the safest and, the most welcoming thing for many animal lovers. Can you just talk about the moment where that kind of turned? I mean, not saying that it's not good to adopt. Of course, it's still good to adopt. But for this specific location, the Humane Society of New York, can you talk a little bit more about, where that turned?
Sure. So for many years, the Humane Society of New York, for decades, was open to the public. People could come in off the street, fill out an adoption application, and go into the adoption center and meet the animals and find a match. That all changed in early 2020 when they closed their doors to the public. And to be fair, at the time, everyone closed their doors to the public because of COVID. The difference between this shelter and other shelters and other businesses is that they never reopened. And so people really had no way of meeting the animals, right? Like, for instance, if you want to adopt a cat, they can't bring cats out onto the street, onto busy 59th Street in Midtown Manhattan. You need to enter the building and meet the cats and get to know the cats. And there was no way of doing that. So they were pretending to be facilitating adoptions as they always had, but we knew, because many of us submitted applications, that they simply weren't responding. And that what the whistleblowers said was true, that they were warehousing these animals instead of sending them to forever homes or to foster homes.
Now, can you talk about the term warehousing? That's the first time that I, heard this term. What does it mean to warehouse animals or cats and dogs?
Sure. So warehousing means that, people surrender their animals, or in the case of this particular shelter, they unfortunately take in dogs from a breeder and then give that breeder free vet care, which is horrible because in a sense, it's behaving like a pet store that's masquerading as a shelter. But that's an aside. And so they have these animals who are in the shelter, however they got there, and they're just keeping them there instead of doing what shelters should be doing, which is to triage them when they come in, get them whatever medical care they might need, whatever behavioral therapy they might need, and then get them into forever homes or to foster homes, because keeping them in a cage for months, or in the case of this shelter, years, is detrimental to their mental health and to their physical health, and it's just horribly inhumane. We know of animals who have been living in this shelter, cats and dogs, since at least 2018. Imagine being kept in a cage for 5 years. Yeah, they might let you out for a walk or for a few minutes each day, for some socialization, but basically you're living in a cage. You would go insane. And that is assuredly what's happening to some of the animals who've been stuck in these cages.
Now, is it normal, because I understand that, at the Humane Society of New York, that sometimes adoptions happen only about once a week, if they do happen. Is that the norm in most adoption centers?
Not at all. This adoption center in particular, the Humane Society of New York, takes in several $1 million a year in donations from New Yorkers who believe that they're supporting a bona fide adoption center that's sending animals home every day and taking in surrenders every day. A shelter of this size, on their tax forms, they claim to have between 125 and 175 animals in the shelter at any given time. A shelter of that size, and with the amount of resources that it has in a centrally located residential neighborhood, should be doing adoptions every day of the week. That's their mission. So the thought that they're only doing one a week, and by their own admission, it's abominable. And as an aside, I'm not even sure I believe their numbers. I think it could be less than that.
Oh, wow. Now, I want to talk a little bit. I know that in an interview with Pix 11, the Humane Society says, of course, that the pandemic slowed things down, but that they were also preferring to carefully look through applications. What are your thoughts on that?
Two things. First of all, the pandemic should have sped things up because people were working from home. There was a desperate desire by so many people to adopt an animal during the pandemic because they would be working at home for an unspecified amount of time in the future. So in the case of this shelter, adoption slowed dramatically, which is the opposite of what should have happened. And so they're now saying, as on Pix 11 News, they said that they've changed their process. In the past, as I mentioned, people could come in off the street, right, fill out an adoption application, meet the animals, and adopt. Well, now they're saying to the public that they need to have an approved application before they'll let anyone into the building. Well, how do you approve an application before you've met the applicant? How do you approve an application before the applicant has even met any of the animals? An adoption center has to be open to adopters, and all the other shelters are.
And is this an issue with just animal adoption centers in general, or is this unique to the Humane Society of New York?
No, this is unique to the Humane Society of New York. Shelters are, by and large, desperate to find good adopters who want to take animals home and give them a forever home and empty that cage so that the shelter can bring in another animal who's been surrendered or found on the street. And so this is very unusual. They call themselves a no-kill shelter, and that might sound good in theory, but when they're not allowing new animals to come in because they don't have empty cages because they're filled with animals who've been stuck there, then those animals end up going to a kill shelter.
Now, what can people watching who love animals, and even I think that there's a spectrum, right, of people who care about animals, what can everybody do who's watching to say hey, we want something to be done about this, and, we want better for those animals?
Yeah, so a couple of things. First of all, my social media handle is @theirturn, and we've posted dozens of viral videos about this campaign. Some of the videos have, on TikTok have millions of views, and so, or in combination. And so share the videos on Instagram, on TikTok, on Twitter, on Facebook. And there's a campaign page on Facebook for this effort. It's called Humane Society of New York, Stop Warehousing Animals. And on that page, we put action items. The one final thing that I would say is that what we're asking for is fair. This building continues to be a fortress. It's under construction now. They are renovating the building now to make it ADA compliant because we pointed out that they can't stay closed if they're going to run an adoption center. So they caved into pressure. They're making the building accessible. In the meantime, it's a construction site. It's loud. It's messy. We just want them to send the animals who are there now to foster homes. They don't have to live in a cage and aren't subjected to a loud and messy renovation.
I'm so glad that you brought that up because I wanted to touch on, how are the animals dealing, kind of living in these type of situations?
Well, we're not there, but studies show that animals who are forced to live in cages for long periods of time are subjected to, psychological and stress and also, physical ailments. I mean, it's not healthy to keep an animal in a cage immobilized for 23 and a half hours a day. Those animals need to be in loving homes where they can jump on people's laps and sleep in bed and play and fetch a ball and get walked. And that's not happening here. They're being warehoused. They need to be in forever loving homes.
Well, Donny, thank you so much for joining us and having this discussion.
Thanks for having me.
To follow along or help this organization fight to protect these animals, please go to their website at www.theirturn.net. Don't go away. We'll be back with more Open right after this.
Found my heart out there in the open. Trees make you feel smaller. Can't help but get lost again.
Feel the beat of nature at a park or forest near you. Find a forest and music inspired by nature at discovertheforest.org.
Kids!
I don't want to talk about it.
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 Families don't have to talk about everything, but they should talk about how to plan for an emergency.
Kids, you all right?
This family's prepared. Get tips and resources to make your family's emergency plan. Go to nyc.gov/readyny or call 311 for more information.
My character, Shazam, knows all about growing up in a family full of teenage superheroes. They're bold.
Where's everyone going? To fight crime?
Okay. Adventurous. Shazam! There's never a dull moment. And no matter what happens, they'll always have your back. All they need is a place to grow and be themselves. And the best part is, you don't have to be a superhero to adopt a teen. Learn more about adopting a teen from foster care. Visit adoptuskids.org. You can't imagine the reward.
You're not gonna get it all right. Just make sure you nail the big stuff.
Mama!
Like making sure your kids are in the right seat for their age and size. Get it right at nhtsa.gov/the right seat.
Welcome back. Addressing the concerns women of color have during pregnancy, the Birthing Center, located in the Bronx, aims to provide quality maternal and reproductive health care. One of their efforts includes the Womb Bus, a mobile health unit. Founder of the organization Myla Flores, joins me now to discuss their efforts. Myla, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Now, can you first just tell me a little bit more about the Birthing Place?
The Birthing Place is The Birthing Place wants to be a birth center in the future. We've been working very hard to bring up a birthing center where people will have access to midwifery care and holistic opportunities and a spectrum of different providers that can wrap around the type of care that our community needs to help reduce the negative outcomes that our community is deeply experiencing right now.
Now, I really want to talk about the Womb Bus. First, I just want to say it sounds like such a fun, creative, just beautiful thing. So can you just tell us, what the Womb Bus is?
Thank you. The Womb Bus is our mobile wellness hub. It is a creative alternative to transcend the systemic issues that we have in our healthcare system as it pertains to maternal health. And the Womb Bus is our pink vehicle that essentially goes to the different communities within the Bronx. We're focused in the Bronx and brings it right to your backyard in terms of what we've been aiming to do, which is to open the birth center. We have to combat legislative issues and cross and overcome a lot of red tape. And that's in progress for the land that's been identified and committed to be the birthing place in the future. It's just been sitting fertile land waiting for us. But in order to make impact now, while we await that future what we envision, we have to do something. And so we're able to reach our community with education, and education just in the past year, the Birthing Place education has reached over 1,000 families with not just childbirth education led by doulas, but a whole bunch of supplemental education that teaches folks about epidurals, inductions, comfort and coping strategies in labor, a lot of pregnancy-focused education, and that's who we've reached with education. Mm-hmm. And now the wellness stage, which we're in now with the Womb Bus, reaching more folks. We had 1 full year of being out there, and we were listening to our community. We had a survey. We were able to hear what is most pressing and most present. And one of the highlights, one of the number one things was folks having fibroids and not knowing, and sometimes that changing the trajectory of their reproductive health. So us being able to do early fibroid detection, we're going to have 80% of the time of all of our Womb Bus events, we're going to have access to fibroid screenings for people who are not pregnant. And then there's postpartum stuff. I'm not going to get into all the details, but just to say we're in the stage of wellness, right? Yeah. And we know that we can have that impact on folks. And some exciting thing that's happening right now is by the end of summer, we just put in just yesterday our offer to a location where we can have a clinic space and not just have education and outreach, but actual clinical care. So we're collaborating with an OBGYN, a midwife, doula, childbirth educator, and all the wonderful wellness professionals to actually have a physical place to reach people.
So I wanted to talk about a little bit because these sound like amazing, just additions to this world. But I want to talk about like just the birthing center, just in general. Why is that so important? Because I know that is a goal of yours or of the organizations, to have a birthing center in the Bronx, especially to grow into one. Why is that so important?
Well, first of all, it's an option that is lacking in New York State. Of the many populous states throughout our country, the 5 most populous states, for instance, have 30 to 70 birth centers, and New York only has 3 licensed accredited birth centers. And accreditation is important because it helps sustain the birth center in locations like New York City, which can be an expensive place to have a birth center. It gives facility fees, which allows the birth center to exist. That is a tangent, but to say that in essence, birth center care reduces significantly the negative impacts, the negative outcomes, maternal morbidities, maternal mortalities, infant mortalities, infant low birth weight. The list goes on, and you can look at the American Association of Birth Centers Strong Start study, where they looked at birth center access throughout the nation and put everything into categories of the hundreds of birth centers that participated in this, significantly less of all of the things, and greater in patient experience, greater in breastfeeding initiation and continuing breastfeeding. So these are some of the things that birth centers really, really offer and statistically show, yet New York does not have access, and we're falling behind. And we really, because we are a state that has significantly worse statistics, we really need to get on board.
Now, a major component of this effort is educating Bronx parents. I think all parents should get education when they're becoming a parent. But what will people learn when they interact with the womb bus?
Oh my gosh. It's really great to have a street team of birth professionals who are committed and activated and inspired and passionate to share their knowledge and their presence with the womb bus. We have partnered with the Conscious Birth Collective, the alumni of the BIPOC birth workers who have moved through a really great mentorship program, and the few BIPOC-led doula collectives who are mentoring these folks. We have a really amazing web of community there, and you could just strike up a conversation about, your postpartum experience. People just come up and they say, "Wow," and they'll read some of the stuff we offer. Infant support feeding circle, a doula. What's a doula? When I fed my baby the first time, and we're space holders for all of that. And we also have plenty of resources. The Bridge Directory is an amazing resource that we really are privileged to have in our community because it has BIPOC professionals, perinatal professionals of all types that are not just in there, but they're vetted, and we're able to refer to those professionals. I'll just give a couple more examples. We're giving acupuncture to the community at no cost. We have, support circles. We have a lot of offerings in English and Spanish. Not all of them are there yet, but of all of the childbirth education classes I mentioned, like 8 or 12, those are all bilingual, and we're translating them to French soon. And the offerings are just so many.
I wanna touch into that because I think that's so important. Just when talking about access, we don't really think about like language barriers and how that could sometimes, I don't want to say prevent, but make it more challenging for a parent to really learn and understand. Can you talk about why that was so important? Also, like just in regard to language, but also the, making it easily accessible. Can you just talk about why all of that is just so important?
Oh, yes. Accessibility. I mean, having a mobile wellness hub to begin with and being able to reach people in their backyards or the park in their neighborhood, is one of the things that we know that sometimes folks aren't trying to go all the way across to such and such place to get somewhere. But if they know the womb bus is going to be in their neighborhood, they might just drop by and get a fibroid screening. Or if they're considering themselves as high risk, or someone has told them they were high risk because they were a certain age, a whole range of things that they could come talk to professionals and just hear and engage with them in thoughtful ways. And that's why we want to make sure that there's always a bilingual person, because Spanish is a very highly spoken language. And the person, Alicia, who is the director of education with me, is personally, she's Puerto Rican, and she wants to make sure that that native Spanish speakers have access. And so we always, not just the education we have, but we're always considering how can we make our workshop, because we're trying. I'm going to not say that we're succeeding. We're succeeding in some areas, but there's so much when it comes to being attentive to that you have to consider, and how to always be creative and make sure that you're thinking about that, because it's huge. It's a big thing.
Right. And I also noticed that there's an effort to make a lot of people of color feel comfortable in a setting that is, focused on health, which I know for a long time, especially in the Bronx and other communities, there has always been like this distrust between, the health system. Why was it so important to make sure that, there was a focus on people of color?
It's essentially that concept of being able to look at someone and feel comfortable, and not to say that any person that you look at who shares the same skin tone as you is going to help you make comfortable, but it's essentially being able to have that natural hope that somebody gets you, and that you can open up a little more and, change the angle and center Black and brown people, because that is so often where we're in the margins. And so when you bring us to the center, the care as a whole changes. And so that's how we want to think about it.
Now, how can people, who are interested, learn a little bit more about these workshops? And do you have to be a parent? What is the process of kind of being involved in that?
Okay, so, from the angle of a blossoming family, that's, or AKA pregnant,
right.
We have plenty of offerings. And as we were in the communities, we're walking through and seeing many people who are not pregnant, and we're hearing about them talking about their reproductive journey, talking about their parents or themselves on menopause. And so knowing that reproductive health as a whole is a big conversation piece. And so we have programs that pay attention to all of this. And one of the things we did is we're adapting. This year we have a whole range of new programs, and I'll just highlight 3. I've mentioned the early fibroid detection, and how just knowing you have a fibroid can totally change things. You can shrink it with your nutrition, and paying attention to that. You could use medicine to help shrink it, or you could get them surgically removed. And sometimes people we're meeting are not even knowing they have a fibroid till they're 4 weeks pregnant. And, so that is one angle where we are giving people an understanding and options if they have to navigate fibroids, and to just prevent them in the first place. Right?
And I also think that it's just also important, like you said, options, right?
Yeah.
So let's say you're not maybe experiencing those things, knowing that it's there, and that whenever you're ready, that place is there for you, I think is just so important.
Yeah.
But I truly want to thank you so much for joining us and having this conversation. I already learned so much, so I truly appreciate it.
Okay, great. I hope to see you at a Wombbus event. We're going to have all kinds of nutritional stuff this summer that, the average person can come through and just care for their reproductive health, whether or not they plan to be pregnant.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
To find out about dates and workshops for the Wombbus, please go to their website at www.thebirthingplace.co/womb-bus. Stay tuned. We have more open for you right after this.
Jason, let's go see your room.
What do you think? We kept it a little spare, so you can decorate it how you like.
Dinner!
Go. Excellent. Soccer is fun. Yeah, I saw you guys out there. We're the family. I thought you were on my team.
We all know what it's like to feel alone. But it just takes one new connection. Want to get out of here? To empower many.
This is unbelievable.
It doesn't take a superhero to bring forces together. We all have the power to reach out.
Let's go!
And help someone feel like they belong.
Pretty cool, huh?
We are stronger together.
Did you know dragging chains can spark a wildfire?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
You're not going to get it all right. Just make sure you nail the big stuff.
Mama!
Like making sure your kids are in the right seat for their age and size. Get it right at nhtsa.gov/the right seat.
Welcome back. Mount Sinai's Health System Center for Excellence in Youth Education makes an effort to introduce more kids to the world of science and healthcare. The CEYE aims to connect with youth from underrepresented communities, offering a range of school year and summer programs. Here to tell us more about their effort is the program director for the CEYE, Kenya Townsend. Kenya, thank you so much for joining me.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Now, can you first just tell me a little bit more about the overall mission of the Center for Excellence in Youth Education at Mount Sinai?
Absolutely. So we were established in 1975, really with the effort to really introduce students that are underrepresented in science and medicine to careers that are in science and medicine. And so CEYE is one of the divisions within the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. And so we work with the cross section of public schools, colleges, as well as youth organizations to prepare students for those careers. And we're really excited to continue to do that work as we've been doing for the last almost 5 decades.
Now, can you talk about some of the different programs designed to introduce students to science and healthcare, which I think is just so amazing. I think that it really shows how much we're just kind of like moving forward in society. Because I think like even like maybe 10, 15 years ago, or, like a while ago, I couldn't even imagine like young students really like working in science and healthcare. So
Yeah.
Can you just talk about those different programs?
Absolutely. So we have we serve over 300 students each year, and that's a combination of academic year programs as well as summer courses. And so we really, our portfolio is longstanding. It's a pathway. So we serve grades 7th all the way through college. And so some of those programs, I'll go into it a little bit. At the academic year programs are programs that actually take place from September through June of the academic year. And so we start at 7th grade. We have a Minds program for 7th graders that are learning about neuroscience, which is really cool. We also have 2 8th grade programs. One is Day with the Scientists. So we bring a group of students over to Mount Sinai's campus real time in the same classrooms that the medical students take their classes in. And so they're putting on lab coats, they're dissecting organs, and that's really exciting to do with the local community. In addition to that, we have a BioEyes program, which students learn about science, but they do it through zebrafish. And so that's incorporated into the standards that they need to learn for 8th grade. And so that's the junior high school level. At the high school level, which is really our sweet spot, we do a lot of program there as well. We have academic year programs, really 2 programs that are in partnership with 2 high schools in Manhattan. One is called the Biomedical Science Enrichment Program, and that's in partnership with the High School for Science, Math, and Engineering. And so that program is very similar to the second program mission, but they come over as 11th grade students, and they take classes at Mount Sinai's campuses for the morning session. It's on their transcript, so it's really great. They get basically intro-level college course level work.
So cool.
Absolutely.
I think I also want to talk about the fact that like it starts at 7th grade, which is like, that's just amazing. Why did you want to start so young? Because I think around 7th grade is like 11, 12-year-olds. And they're learning this stuff that, like you mentioned, people don't really even learn until they get to college. So, why did you want to start so early?
Yeah. So 7th grade was really important in general because we work really closely with New York State Education Department. And that is really where they are mandated to have like science units. And so we felt like in partnership with that would make sense to start at the 7th grade level. middle, obviously digging deeper into the pipeline is important as well. But 7th grade, they can really understand some of the concept of neuroscience and organ systems too.
Now, I also noticed that just over the past several years, there's been an effort to encourage more children and even young adults to pursue careers and hobbies in STEM. Why do you think that why do you think we're seeing this shift? And I'm happy that we're seeing it because like I mentioned, like even when I was young, I don't think that I had these types of opportunities available. So, why do you think we're seeing that shift?
Yeah. So, I mean, collectively, Black, Hispanic, American, Indians, and Native Alaskans make up 31% of the population, but only 24% of the careers in STEM. And usually those careers are those that require technical skills and really certifications rather than a bachelor's degree or higher education. And so it's been a concerted effort across the board from a lot of organizations like CEYE, right, to make sure we increase that. So in the next 10 to 15 years, we can see these young people at the face of medicine and science.
Now, I also want to talk about that because I think it's so important. Recently, we've been in the healthcare system, we've been talking about race and how that's been impacting a lot of the patients. How do you think having these children be involved in this is going to impact the future, of the healthcare system, especially for people of color?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, one, it doesn't hurt that we are in New York City, which is one of the most diverse places, I think, in the world. And so being at Mount Sinai, which is a really large health system in the city, I think having young people be introduced and work with faculty, right, that have studied and are doing that, they really see themselves. And so that is one of our underlying missions, is for students to be able to see themselves as scientists. And so if they can do that, then they see themselves in health career. And now we can change the scope of diversity, right, in the future. So.
Now, also talking about diversity, I think that, of course, race is important, but also, your income and, the family that you come from. I know that anything with medicine and science tends to often, or maybe there's this misconception that it's just, super expensive and that you have to have money to, kind of learn these things.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, again, while we definitely service students that are underrepresented in medicine, we also do look at students that are economically disadvantaged. And so it can be, depending on what you want to do in higher education, costly to sort of do that. And so by offering our programs free of charge, right, we also sometimes pay some of our students that are in our programs. We lighten the load and at least have them hold on to the idea and the possibility that they too can do it. And so it's important to know that, but not to be discouraged around what you want to do, right? Anything that you want in life really is going to take some hard work. And so we want to be a support system along with our other colleagues that are doing this work that can continue to push you forward.
So you mentioned that sometimes you even pay students. I think any student listening to that is like, that sounds good. Can you just talk about some of the incentives that come with joining these types of programs?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have summer programs that are open. So we work in partnerships, but also any students that are interested that live in the Bronx, anywhere in New York City, they can apply to our summer program. So the application is currently closed for this summer, but in the future, we're happy to come back to talk some more about it. But those students that are accepted to the program, they do get Metro cards. We do give them a stipend, right? They get to get a lab coat, they get an ID. So I mean, they're really excited to be on campus. And really, while the funds is really nice, really it's the idea of being around this and the possibility that we at CEYE really feel is the bigger prize. But obviously we want to make sure that that isn't a barrier and they're selecting working other than actually doing some sort of research or experience in a hospital.
That is also very true, because I know that sometimes there could be opportunities available, but if you're like, I have to help support my family, right, sometimes kids are going to just choose the option that's going to help support their family. So thank you so much for mentioning that.
Yeah.
Now, as mentioned before, the program begins in 7th grade. Is there an opportunity to kind of grow within the program? So maybe you started at 7th grade and then now you're an 11th grader and you're still in the program. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So, I mean, the goal, right? We have a portfolio programming from 7th all the way through college. And the goal is to have students from 7th grade all the way through college, right? And then actually become what they would like to be in that field. And so we have partner programs. We drill down into them to make sure they know when they get to high school, right? This is the high school that we have partnerships with. Also, if you're just in any high school, right, throughout New York City, please apply to our programs. They're open to 9th through 11th grade students. And so we keep little nodes on all of them to make sure that they actually are still applying to our programs and get to stay in. And we have quite a few that have matriculated even into the medical school.
Now, I think this is a really amazing amazing program. I kind of wish I had something like this, when I was in middle school. But this sounds so amazing. What are the requirements, though, for applying to this type of program?
Yeah. So for our summer programs that are open for any New York City students, you do need to be part of any of the underrepresented groups that I mentioned a little earlier. You do need to go to a public school, right? And really, we have application and do essays. It's a very competitive program. I won't say that it isn't, but I think that if you have the goals to really do it, this is worth applying to, because we become a family and you never really get rid of us.
That's awesome. That's so amazing. And then can you just talk a little bit? I'm not sure if you work closely with the students, but can you just talk? Well, since you do, can you talk a little bit, about how that has been for you, like seeing some of these kids from these communities kind of grow in this program?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I am one of the kids from the community, right? I was pre-med. I didn't have this opportunity when I was younger, but I learned about it in college and a little later. And so it brings me such joy to be able to see the students really think about this idea, right? And some of the skills that you're learning on the way from a 7th grader or a high schooler to be in STEM are really transferable to wherever you go. Luckily, we do have great students that continue on into STEM. We have a really high rate of college graduates that go on and study science. So, it's really exciting for the team and I to really see the students develop, right, at this critical point in their life and really decide they want to go major in neuroscience, or they want to go be a doctor and then come back for the college program or matriculate and apply and ask for a letter of recommendation into the medical school. So I can't even, it's not a tangible way that I can really say that, but I really enjoy it.
Now, seeing from your own experience to seeing these kids, what do you hope is the next step for the future of, children in, just from underrepresented communities in healthcare? What do you hope to see as the next step? And what are some ways that we can make that even better for these kids?
Yeah. So, I think the hope and the next step is, one, to continue to move forward. This doesn't become a barrier for us. This is just very normal, right? And so that percentage gets to grow, that they're coming back and giving back. We do teach that as well. So if they're a physician or if they're a scientist, they're also giving back in their communities, whether it's going to be in New York City or someplace else. And we just want to continue to push the idea of diversity and to now lower the bar some for students to be able to get in, where this is just as normal as wanting to be a teacher or entertainer. That would be the goal.
Right. And I also think it's important that this is such an amazing opportunity, but hopefully it's not just for certain kids, but literally it's just a norm in a lot of public schools that you have this type of education. But I want to thank you so much for joining us and having this discussion. I'm already inspired, even though I'm not in 7th grade. I was inspired by this, so I truly appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you so much for having me.
To find out more about CEYE summer programs, please go to their website, which you can find on the screen below. We have to take a quick break, but we'll be back with more Open right after this.
Is it time yet?
It's time.
Mom's starting time for dinner.
Oh, it's really good.
Donating pet food is one of the many ways you can help families in your community. Pets and people belong together. Learn more at petsandpeopletogether.org.
I'll see ya.
After a basketball game, a black teenage boy, Brandon, reads his texts in his family group chat. Auntie Flo, congrats on the big win. Mom, that's my baby. Brandon replies, thanks y'all. In a park, his sister Maya texts, where are we celebrating? Dad replies, home. Mom texts, I got dinner going. Auntie Flo replies, ooh, I can't wait. Then receives a FEMA flood watch text alert. She texts the family, anyone see that weather alert? We need a plan to stay safe, especially after last year. Ready has a list of resources at ready.gov/plan. In his workshop, Dad sends a photo of a ready. Looks like we need flashlights and batteries, leaving a score with a shopping bag. Brandon replies, I got us covered. Mom texts, I'll check in with Grandma and Papa. Maya texts, thanks Auntie, feeling good about this plan.
I got some batteries and 2 flashlights.
I feel like he gets taller every time I see him.
How do you know when you've made the right decision? It's the feeling you get in your gut. The one that tells you what's right or wrong. It's the one that says, sure, I can have a drink. Or the feeling that says, okay, I've been drinking. Now what? It's It's the voice inside you that says, I'm buzzed. Better leave the car when it's time to go. Plan ahead. Catch a sober ride. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
Welcome back. One organization is using the art of film and photography as a form of healing. Nana's Living Room offers a 12-week program teaching participants the ins and outs of these art forms with the goal of assisting at-risk communities on their journey toward a better path. Joining me to discuss the program is co-founder David Hopper and Director of Programs Jillian Hopper. Thank you both so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Now, can you just talk about the inspiration behind the creation of Nana's Living Room?
Sure. The inspiration actually came from seeing what's going on in the world, right? Within the community with the young people, guns, gang violence, things of that nature. And my background, pretty much coming from that, it was like, we need something to give the kids. Like a lot of times you hear people say, oh, put the guns down or stop doing this, stop doing that. But we give them nothing in return. And Nana's Living Room is here to give them something in return.
Now, can you talk about the name? Because I really like the name. It sounds so comforting and it's so nice. So can you just talk about, the creation behind the name and what inspired that?
Sure. So what inspired Nana's Living Room is we just were kind of thinking of where was the safest place we went to when we was a child. So growing up, one of the safest places I went to was my grandmother's house, my great-grandmother's house. And back then, it was when they had the plastic on the sofas, right? So even though you kind of stuck to the chair, but it was still a safe place to be able to kind of speak your heart and speak your mind to someone who understood and didn't kind of push you away.
And I also really like, just for me personally, I used to watch a lot of movies and stuff at my grandma's house. So that's why, I like the name as well, because I think, when I think about the times that I watched several movies and because of your organization, where you guys focus in, I just thought that was really cool. So thank you so much for sharing that. Now, how does your organization, speaking of movie, how does your organization explore movies, arts, and photography?
Yeah.
For that, we pretty much, in our mission, right? Our mission has a part and it says we teach kids film and photography as well as through experiential learning. So we actually have them use their narrative, right? So the things that they're going through on a daily basis, we use that. We ask them to use that to create and develop
their story.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much that, how that coincides. Every day, I like to say, my life is a movie, right? And it's true. You're the writer, you're the director, you're the editor of your own movie. And we let the kids know your end is the way you write it.
Mm-hmm. Now, I also want to touch on the fact that, when I think of movies and art and photography, for me, I always think of it as entertainment, but I think it's so beautiful that you guys kind of use it as a form of healing. Can you talk about, what inspired you both to use, movies, art, and photography, as a form of healing?
Sure. I think it's kind of like, as he said, you create your own story, right? And I think one of the things we think about, right? It's funny. I was just having a conversation with some family members and we were talking about how we watch movies and we start crying and, the men were kind of like, it's just a movie. And it's it's just a character, but it's a character that you connect with, right? Because when you're watching a movie, you're watching a television show, you connect with that character, whether it be from an experience, whether it be a trigger, whether it be something that you look at as a coping mechanism, we connect with it. So we look at that as a form of healing as well because of that connection to the character, because of that connection to the movie.
Now, what are some of the day-to-day activities, participants will have while they're in this program?
Day-to-day, we pretty much show them the basics. We start with the basics of the camera. So anybody that picks up a camera, to really get the most out of it, you have to know the photographer's triangle, which is the ISO, the shutter speed, f-stop, things of that nature. So we teach them the basics, and then from the basics, they go on to different levels, from just learning how to have a photo shoot, do a photo shoot, all the way down to shooting a short film. So every day in the day is pretty much going through them steps. So we have a curriculum. We have a 6-step curriculum as well. So through the day, this is what they're doing.
Now, I think it's also really cool because the stuff that you're talking about, I know people pay a lot of money, to learn this stuff, and sometimes it's often associated with like prestigious schools and events. Can you talk about the importance of making this accessible, especially to people who are probably most vulnerable?
Sure, absolutely. It's important to give back to our Black and Brown communities, right? Because we come from that community and we understand the struggles and the challenges that our parents have faced just kind of raising us. So it's important for us to be able to give something back to them to where they don't have to struggle, where they don't have to pay so much to kind of learn these skills. And not only that, it's just also, as we said, it's a circle of healing. It's a way to kind of come in and be able to connect with others and also to be able to address your traumas and tribulations and trials that you may go through in the community.
Now, I know that the program will also address issues of gun and gang violence, which you mentioned. How do you do this in a way that connects to the participants? I know sometimes that can feel a little bit challenging, especially maybe if somebody, let's say they want to go on a new path. How do you do that while making them feel comfortable and connecting to them?
Well, like I spoke earlier, it's about them. It's about the participant. So we deal with the healing circle, and we let them know when we first come into the class, like everybody sits in the circle, and we let them know that we're not the facilitators, we're not the teachers, right? We're assistants, and everybody that's sitting next to you is an assistant. So we're here together. So that alone opens them up to be more vulnerable. And from that, we ask, as Mrs. Hopper would say, who would like to be in front of the camera, who would like to be behind the camera. And then from that, we pretty much dictate how we actually interact with the child.
Now, I also
with the participant, I'm sorry.
Well, can you talk about maybe like who are the participants? So like what age group and, who is most likely or who is eligible to join this program?
Sure, absolutely. So we are currently working with children between the ages of 8 to 24. So as long as you reside in the Black and Brown community, you are eligible to join the program. We welcome each and every single person to come and join the program.
Now, I also want to talk about the fact that we talked about it, but, you're assisting at-risk youth and people who were formerly incarcerated. Can you talk about the importance of making a space for people of this community? Because I think that sometimes, let's say, once you maybe stepped over that journey, sometimes you can feel forgotten. Can you just talk about the importance of, putting the spotlight on them in a positive way?
Sure.
Sure. That is... that's pretty much close to my heart. I'm an individual from both of those sides, right? At-risk youth, formerly incarcerated. I did 7 years in prison for a shooting. Fortunately, nobody was deceased. And during my time, I realized there's no one, you have no right to harm another person, right? And coming home, I understand that dealing with the youth, it's not about them lashing out and being angry. Anger is a part of life. It's about how you deal with it, right? The coping mechanisms. And we understand that giving them options and opportunities and ways to deal with the anger really helps. And that's the reason why we really dove in or focused on the at-risk youth and formerly incarcerated. And, we're not here for intervention, right? Once they're impacted by the system, we jump in. No, that's not it. We're here for prevention. We want to get to them before they actually get to the system. And the individual that's coming home from the system, they help as mentors and guides for the younger individuals.
Now, can you talk about some of the milestones participants have accomplished in this amazing program?
Sure, absolutely. So I would definitely say one recent project that we just worked on, we were working on creating a senior video, which is where some of the seniors come in and they're creating their video for the graduation. So initially when we first started announcing it, that we were going to be filming it, a lot of seniors were kind of like, no, I don't want to be on camera. No. So when they came, it was the first week that we did it. It was just the boys and we started with one boy and he was just like, no. And then next thing you know, and the others were like, go ahead, do it. And then he did it, and the next thing you know, we had 5 other boys after that. And then next week, when we came back and said we were shooting again, it was a whole classroom filled with girls. So it was definitely an impact, and we understood that each person kind of had a milestone because they looked at it to say, now I want to participate and join in. And it wasn't just only about just being in front of the camera, but it was also about learning the camera in that same day. So that was definitely a milestone for us.
And just even hearing that, it sounds like it's also an opportunity for the participants to help each other, because there was a lot of like, peer motivation. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. It was definitely peer motivation. That's one of the things we do, is kind of teach them how to work with each other, how to do team building skills to increase self-confidence and self-esteem. So we feel like that's definitely important.
Yes, I believe it's 3 things that we focus on. So self-love, you have to love yourself. Self-awareness, understand what triggers you, and then something we call the umbrella effect, which is the people that protect you are your umbrella, right? And you have to stay connected to them. So once you let the umbrella go in the wind, the umbrella goes away and you get wet. Nobody wins. So you have to stay connected to your umbrella. So that's the people that that protect you, your mother, your grandmother, Nana, things of that nature. So. And
your peers with the teenagers.
Right. And I really love to hear that, because I just think that's amazing. As you mentioned, it's not necessarily like an intervention, whereas like you have somebody who's maybe above you that's like talking at you. Yeah. It's like a community thing, which I think is just so amazing. Now, what do you hope people take away from the program?
So we hope that people definitely learn photography skills and videography skills, of course. We also hope that people learn coping mechanisms, learn ways to deal with triggers, because we are triggered in the community. We also learn how to deal with peer pressure. That's one of the things, coming from a social work background and working with teenagers when I first started. I feel like that's definitely important to kind of talk about your peers and positive influences versus negative influences. So ways to kind of address that in the community, and not just only that, to also think about ways to help your community and to give back to your community, because that is very important to us.
And then can you talk also about what do you hope to see people learn from the program?
Yeah, sure. I hope to instill greatness, right? Something we say is we want them to activate their greatness, because everybody has greatness inside them. This needs to be activated. So we believe that doing what we do will activate that greatness. And now that they're great, they see their greatness, they can spill that light and that greatness onto someone else.
Well, I appreciate you both so much, for taking the time to speak with us. I really loved learning about it. I know we met previously, and I was like, this sounds amazing. I have to talk about it. So thank you both so much.
Thank you.
We also bought some gifts for you.
Look how awesome, this is so cute. Thank you so much. I really love this, so thank you. So just so everybody can see what it is, it's Nana's living room. Thank you guys so much.
No problem. Thank you.
If you or someone you know is interested in taking part in this amazing program, please go to their website at www.nannysliving.org. We've come to the end of our show today. I'd like to thank all of our guests for joining us and you, the viewers, for tuning in. If you miss any part of today's show, you can catch the recable cast at 5 and 10 p.m. on Optimum Channel 67 and Verizon Fios Channel 33, or watch anytime on the web at bronxnet.org. I'm Kibin Alleyne, wishing you and yours safety and wellness now and always. See you next time.